Yep, we can see it. Hello from Royal University of Midrealm. Hi folks. Sorry about the confusion. I don't do live streaming very often. Never to another person's group, only to my own page. So we got 2 people watching right now. So basically, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what I want to do. It is a hour to 90-minute class on how to pattern, plan, cut out, and put together your own billfold wallet for ID, membership cards, anything like that. So we're going to get started here. The first thing you're going to need is an idea of what we're making. Just a little card holder like this. Very simple. Okay? But in learning how to make it, you are going to acquire a lot of the basic skills that you will need to do much more complex patterns. And let's get started. So the first thing you need is a pattern. So this is just cardstock. Every one of us probably use some of this to do our projects in school. They're 2 for $1 at the dollar store kind of thing. And the next thing you're going to need is some kind of a business card or an ID card or whatever. Now, you can do this one of 2 ways. You can either have your billfold wide like this so that your cards fit in like this, or you can do it long and have it fit in like this. I'm going to do wide like this today. But it's your project. You can do it however you like. As you follow along, you'll see that you can do it either way. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is size out your card on your card stock. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace the card itself with a pen, just like that. Okay? Now, we also need to factor in our stitching allowance, which is, just going to use a very small ruler so you guys can see. Now, I like 3/16 as my preferred spacing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out 3/16 all the way around. Like that. And I eyeballed that pretty close to the edge here. And I'm going to do this for the card slot. I'm going to do it on 3 sides. Because you don't need seam allowance on the 4th side, because that's going to be the open side for where you put your cards in. All right. Just like that. All right. So that is my card pocket. Next, we're going to cut this out. Now you can use scissors or a box cutter or any kind of knife that'll work, whatever works best for you. There is no real wrong answer to that. So when patterning out a project, a couple of things that you're always going to want to keep in mind is your seam allowance, how deep each pocket is going to be, how many cards you're going to be putting into it, and order of construction. Okay, so this is a bifold, so we are going to need 2 of these. So I'm just going to write on the pattern ×2. That way, when I reference this pattern again a year from now, I will know that I need 2 of those. So now we know how wide our pocket is going to be and how deep our pocket is going to be. We need to know how big our outer shell is going to be. So I measure that out at exactly 3 3/4 inches. Okay, so I'm just going to put 3 3/4 here. I'm going to measure the depth. Looks like I've got 2 3/8. So I'm going to do 2 3/8 here. Okay. Now your bifold is going to be different depending on the size of card you're using. I'm using just a standard, it's the same size as a bank card, but you can make these the size of a dollar bill. You can make them whatever size you want. There's no wrong answer here. Whatever your project needs. The patterning out is the same way. So now we need to know the size of our main body. So we know that our depth is 3 3/4. So I'm going to mark out 3 3/4 here, 3 3/4 here, and I'm going to draw my straight line. Now you can just use your insert as your template. Okay, I'm going to put a little nick here just so that I know that's where my first template's going to be. But we also need to figure out how wide of a spacing we want between our card pockets. So I'm a big fan of 3/4 inch. I don't know why. I settled on that a while ago. It seems to work for me. I'm gonna go to 3 3/4 inch there, and 3/4 inch there, and then I'm gonna take my card pocket again. I'm gonna go up and butt up to my marks. Right there like that. There it is. There is my outer shell. Always cut in your lines, don't waver. Go. Save that for the next project. So that is our main pattern. Now we also have to figure out how we're going to close this. So on this I did a simple toggle and keeper. Not toggle, strap and keeper. And I just used a rivet. We're not going to bother with any rivets today. Everything is going to be hand stitched, because that's easy and you don't need to have special equipment. All you need is a needle and thread for that. Now the next thing that we're going to need is a thumb notch. in our card pocket. Otherwise, getting our cards out is going to be really difficult. So we're going to take our card pocket and we're going to fold it in half like this. Exactly. Sometimes the heavy cardstock doesn't want to fold quite exactly where you need it to. There we go. Okay, so now we have center. All right. Now, you can do this a couple of different ways. Find yourself something round to use as a template. I've got a little bottle cap here. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to mark it off. Let's do this where you guys can see. Something like that. Okay? You don't want it too narrow. You don't want it too deep, but you also don't want it too wide or too shallow. So, fold it back over so that we cut everything evenly. There we go. Bingo. Okay. Now we need to figure out where we want our strap pocket, our strap and keeper to go. So we need to find center on this guy. So I'm going to fold over here like that. Okay, so now we have our center on that. We are going to start our strap a little back from the edge. We're going to go, well, let's go with our magic number of 3/4 of an inch. And then our keeper on the other side, strap, there, mark that. And then our strap, let's go a full inch back because that needs to be a little bit more recessed. And I'm going to make that an inch wide. So I'm putting the 1/2 inch on center, putting a notch there and a notch there. So that is where our keeper is going to go, like that. So the strap will come off this direction, come back around, and tuck under. Mine in frame? Probably not. Okay. So next, we need some leather. What do I got? I got some 4-ounce right here. It's got some uneven cuts that I messed up from a previous project, but we can use that one good edge that I've got on here. Yeah. Now, we are not going to use the pen because if I draw on here, make sure I don't have any ink on my fingers. If you do, go wash your hands because this is a sensitive spot. Okay, I'm going to take my scratch awl. You can use a regular sewing awl or even just a sharp nail or a stitching needle. And I'm going to scratch my line, and scratch my line. And then I'm going to cut my piece. Go slow. Remember the old carpenter's adage, measure twice, cut once. And also remember the Leatherworkers, special motto, the fingers never leave the hand. That is a very important rule that all leatherworkers must abide by, because there's nothing worse than getting blood on a project. That really is the only reason for that rule. Okay, so now I've got that piece marked out. I'm going to put that aside, and just so that I don't lose pieces, clip them together. Go back to my offcut here. Now these pieces are small enough that a scrap bag from Tandy is more than enough material for you to finish a project like this. And those are $5 or $6. They're pretty affordable. Hobby Lobby, if you frequent that kind of a business, or Michael's or whatever, will also have leather scraps available. Whatever's in your local area. I'm sure there's plenty of scrap leather available. Alright. So this is the piece that's going to take a little bit of artistry to cut out, because of that finger loop. So we're just going to be very gentle. Don't rush. There you go. So that's one. Always keep track of your tools. Oops. And always pay attention to what you're doing. So as you can see, this is a pretty simple pattern, but it's one that anybody can really design on the fly. If you understand what you need it for, you can design even more complicated patterns just by looking at the thing that you need to use it for and going around that. Forgot what I was trying to say there. Without a pattern like this, I mean, you can take some cardstock and you can knock together a copy of what it is you're trying to make very easily, and it's a lot cheaper to destroy paper than it is to destroy leather. So when patterning things out, always play around with your paper. Don't hesitate to waste a lot of it if you have to. So there's my two inserts. Now I'm just going to take, what do I want? Let's go with a 1/2 inch strap here. Arbitrary width, and I think it'll look good. Now, as I'm going along, if anybody has any questions, my wife is actually sitting just off camera beside me. If anybody has any questions, she can see the screen. So there is our strap or tongue. Now we need a keeper. So I'm going to do another 1 inch, or not a 1 inch, half inch here. So, now, length on this, it needs to be able to go over our strap and get anchored at both ends. So, we're going to go and look at our ruler and see how much room we need. Now, I'm going to do a simple box stitch on either side, okay? So I have to allow room for that. And I'm thinking, if I go 1.5 inches, that'll give me 1/2 inch on either side of my 1/2 inch strap for a nice simple little box stitch. Just like that. Okay, and you see how that's going to work. That's just going to tuck in there like that, and there you go. But I am a big fan of knocking my corners, so just for aesthetics purposes, I'm just going to buck off 1 millimeter of each of those corners, and I'm going to do the strap. Actually, on the strap, just to keep things nice and simple, I'm going to do a chisel tip, and I'm going to buck that off there like that. Okay, rather than do a rounded point or an English point, or I think that looks very nice. Also, it is easy to slip under the keeper. And I'm going to also buck the back corners of that, just like that. Now, we need to go back to our template. And we need to figure out exactly where we want these to sit. So, I've got my mark there. And then I'm going to take, make sure you don't have anything underneath, messing with you lying down flat on your piece. So, there's my center, and that actually seems a little bit far up, so I'm actually going to go up to my line, and my keeper is going to be butted to my 1 inch line. Alright, and then I'm going to pierce all the way through into the paper and the leather at the same time. I'm just going to go and do a little box, just like that. Same thing on this side. Now I have my marks on the paper as well. Same thing with this. I'm going to center my box stitch to my point that I've marked on my pattern, and I'm going to pierce my box stitch, just a 2x2. How well you guys can see that on camera. Okay, just like that. And now I'm going to go to my main piece. I'm going to lay my pattern down, and I'm just going to follow through using the holes I've just punched in the paper to transfer those spacings right onto my leather. Now, there are a lot of other tools I could be using that would speed this process along. Okay, I have stitching chisels, I have corner punches, various other tools that I could be using that make this a lot more efficient of a process. But a lot of people don't have that. So I kind of want to show you how to do without, and then later on, if you decide to invest in some tools, you can streamline your process. So, first step, make sure that our holes are completely through. Okay, look through, see a little sunlight. Same thing with this guy. And then what we are going to do is, this is extremely thin leather. Like I said, it's like 3 to 4 ounce. I'm not going to use a beveler to bevel my edges. I'm going to take an old piece of sandpaper and I'm just going to gently round my edges here. Don't need much. There we go. And we're going to do our strap as well. I'm just taking the worst of that sharp corner off of my leather and taking some of the fuzzy bits off my side. And you'll see why in just a second. We're going to do something called burnishing. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. Now I'm sanding all in one direction. Like at first I might do my first couple of passes back and forth, but I'm finishing off by all going in one direction so that I'm not lifting more fibers. I'm just taking lifted fibers off. And you're going to create a little bit of dust, but if you're using veg tan leather, don't worry about it. The veg tan is a pretty non-toxic product. I don't recommend it, but you can actually eat the stuff. So now that I've got my pieces set to go, we can start the assembly process. I want to talk a little bit more about the patterning process. Okay? So, just to rehash, this is not a pattern that I have living in my brain. Okay? Even though I've probably made 20 or 30 of these particular billfold or bifold wallets. The process of how to pattern and how to make this is what's been living in my brain. I don't have these measurements pre-recorded down anywhere. I don't have paper templates of these saved. Anytime I need to make one, this is exactly how I go about doing it. And if you understand the process of how to knock together a pattern for whatever it is you're doing, you can do this for anything. If you're making wallets, if you're doing a bag, understanding the basic structure of how something is made and then knowing how big you want to make it if you understand just how simple putting a pattern together is, you don't need to buy patterns from Etsy. You don't need to download someone else's. You can just sit at your workbench with a little paper, and before long, you'll have a library of your own patterns just sitting there ready for you to go. And that's probably the most intimidating thing for a lot of new crafters is figuring out where their pattern is going to come from. But if you understand basic patterning, the most anxiety-inducing aspects becomes the simplest and in some cases the most fun. Because you can get pretty crazy with your patterns. And if you look at leatherworking throughout history, a lot of it is just somebody saw something and they went home and they made a version of it, and then someone saw that and they made a version of that. Patterns evolved through history. Today we look at a lot of those designs and we take them for gospel of that's how it was done. Well, that's actually not true. An awful lot of artistry and evolution went into bags, and sure, there were some styles that were repeated a lot because they were popular, or because they were easy, or because some famous person made them and everybody else wanted them made that way. But patterns evolved, and often it evolved just because somebody didn't have a template for how the thing was made. So they said, well, I understand the basic construction. I'm going to do some layouts, and I'm going to come up with my own version. And that is how the art evolves. And don't be afraid to evolve it yourself. So here we go. I'm just taking the rough cut marks out of my leather with the sandpaper. Just like that. And I'm only doing this on the edges that are finished, okay? My outer piece, outer lines of the card inserts here and of my backing are going to have some more work done to them. So for now, I'm just leaving them alone because there's no point in doubling up on my work. Go. Next step is called burnishing. So burnishing is basically just making your fuzzy edges of your leather smooth. Touch that up just a little bit. Now, modern products like gum tragacanth and toconol and whatever, different burnishing agents work really, really well, but you don't need them. For thousands of years, beeswax worked brilliantly. So we're just going to take our beeswax and we're just going to rub in a single direction. Don't back and forth this because you don't want to lift your leather fibers again. Rub that along. And you don't need much. Just a little bit, like that. You can get beeswax at apiaries, candle making supplies, just your local grocery store probably. There are no shortages of places to get beeswax, which is one of the reasons I love it as a burnishing agent. And a little bit goes a very, very long way. Just like that. Okay. Now, this is a varnishing stick. You can buy these from just about every leather supply place ever. Or you can make them yourself if you can turn wood. But today, I'm going to show you how our ancestors did it 1,000 years ago, if I can find the tool.
It's right there. By the rivet? Behind that?
No. I need a piece of... I'll use this if I have to. Yeah, I'll use this. Piece of antler, just like that. Oh, the thing I was looking for, the good one, is right in front of me, of course. This is elk or deer antler. This is the burnishing tool of choice for the last 100,000 years of human history, something like that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go in and we are just going to gently rub back and forth a little bit. Very light pressure. Just like that. Doesn't take much. So I'm going from one side to the next, and then back to my starting. I'm not going back and forth like this, okay? I'm just like that, okay? And if you use too much pressure, what you might wind up with is a little bit of a mushrooming on your edge. But you can just touch that up like this. Just like that. And then what you wind up with is a nice slicked edge. There we go. So I stroke, lift, back, stroke. Just like that. Okay, same thing over here. And all this is really doing is it's matting down the fibers of the leather so that wear and tear over the course of use, they're not going to wind up fuzzy like a piece of suede. There we go. Just like that. Now that we've got our edges on this done, we're going to go on and we're going to quickly bang it off on these guys. These are the parts that are going to have the most wear and tear, I think, because they are outside of the wallet. Little wax all along my edges, just like this. Now you can grind a groove into a piece of elk to help act as a guide. It's not really required. Just speeds things up, that's all. I use this as a bone folder as well as a burnishing tool. So I don't bother putting the groove in because I might need that smooth piece of antler for a different use. There we go. Now, not as glossy as what you might get with a modern burnishing compound, but you also don't need to order Tokonol from Japan, or order your burnishing agent, your gum tragacanth from where your local leather supply. You probably have plenty of wax just sitting on a shelf in the form of a candle. And yes, before you ask, paraffin does work. I'm not as a fan of it because it never really absorbs into the leather as well, and eventually the beeswax will lose its tacky feeling as it absorbs further into the leather. The paraffin, it'll always feel waxy, so that's why I don't like it. But yes, you can use paraffin as well. Okay, there we go. All my pieces are nice and burnished. Now it's ready for the assembly phase. So, get all my parts together here. Now, what we're going to be doing, don't need you anymore. We're just going to dry fit to see how this is going to go together. Now, if I put my card pockets and attach them to my backing first, then I can't put my keeper and strap on, because there's no way I'm going to get a needle and thread down in there. So we have to put these on first. So I'm going to grab myself some thread here. Today I'm going to go with some waxed. This is synthetic. I would use the linen today, except I have run out, so my apologies. Yeah. And I do like the contrast, the light color of the leather with the dark thread. Now my first piece, I can't hear you. Yeah. Oh yeah, if you want to dye the leather, this is you should do it before you burnish and before you stitch anything on, because if you use anything but a black thread, you're going to dye your thread as well. So I'm going to do about a yard, which is way more than I need for this project. And I'm going to show you, let's get the knife out of the way so I don't cut myself, a little trick with your needle to prevent it from ever slipping off of your thread while you're hand sewing. Okay? Get that through there. So, to prevent your needle from ever slipping off your thread, I'm going to take the point of my needle and I am going to pierce the thread, pull that tight, and now look at that. It's not going to fall off. Okay? Now, I could show you a saddle stitch using a stitching pony, but stitching ponies are expensive, and if you're just getting into leather crafting, you don't really need one. So I'm just going to tie a knot in the back to act as a bit of an anchor. Okay? And dig through my Treo stuff. I'm just going to melt that real quick so it doesn't fray up. Now, let's do my keeper first. I want to bury that knot that I just put in the end of my leather. So, we're in an X or box? Box, I agree. So, come back up. Let's see if you guys can see that. So I've gone in one hole, over and out. Now I'm going to take my keeper and I'm going to come out the corresponding hole, and then back into the next hole, and this is about as simple a stitch as you can imagine. There's a question.
Are you going just straight through, or are you going to do pre-punch holes?
Am I just going through or pre-punching holes? I have pre-punched these holes using my awl earlier in the video. Leather is far too tough for you to be able to just take a basic hand sewing needle and push through the leather without really wrecking your hands. It can be done if your needle is very, very sharp and your leather is very thin, but I don't recommend it. Always pre-punch your holes whenever possible. Thanks for that question, it was a good one. So, like that, and like that, and we're just going to keep going around until we've got, don't be afraid, use little pliers. I've got a little arthritis in my hands, so there we go. Box is starting to form. Now, if both sides of the leather are going to be seen, and it really matters, what you can do is you can pierce through one and then come out in between the layers like that, tie your knot inside and hide your knot. But because the card sleeve is going to be over this, what I can do is I can just tie a little knot here, get it as close and tight to the leather as you can. Snip that off, and because it's synthetic, I can just warm that up and get it flat, and there you have just a little box stitch. And then of course we got to do it again. And this is where the video is going to start to get a little tedious, because you're going to sit here and watch me sew. But if you've got the materials and you're following along, it's not so bad. So again, I'm going to start in between the layers so that my first knot at the end of my thread isn't seen. Don't stab yourself in the thumb. That's counterintuitive.
Unless you want a natural red dye.
All right. Knife out of the way before I cut myself, because, you know, I will. Where did I put my hole? Sometimes the hole's a little hard to find. Especially on the fuzzy side. Okay. Again, just a little box stitch, in and out, in and out. Nothing fancy. If you have rivets, a little rivet will serve instead of a box stitch quite nicely. But I figured today, since this is the rum community for the SCA. Let's avoid modern contrivances, eh? All right. There is my box stitch. Quick little knot. Don't get tangled on everything because, you know, you're disorganized. Yeah, one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of things. There we go. Here we are. That's just going to come in there, tuck in just like that, and give you a friction fit closure for your wallet. Now, one last box stitch. I know, I know. Told you this was the tedious part. No, keep it consistent. We're gonna do. We could do. I could do an X stitch on this just to be different, but I'm gonna stay with my consistency here. If you guys can hear the background noise, I apologize. There's a public green space literally outside my window and people are walking by. So much for social distancing. All right. Okay, just about there. And then the fun part begins. I'm kidding, more sewing. Okay. Oh. Don't let that happen. Let your thread get away from you. All right. Okay, so there we go. So how that's going to work is that's going to fold together just like this. That strap is going to come over. Done. Just like that. Nice and neat. And clumsy. And if that, you can make that strap even longer if you wanted, and you could put a keeper on the same side so that it goes over all the way around and tucked under. There's a bunch of different ways that you can alter this design to make it unique to you. But now we get on to the next part, which is putting our card slots on. I'm going to, just for the sake of expediency today, I'm going to cheat just a little, if you'll forgive me. I've got a little bit of double-sided tape. I'm just going to take a couple of little bits like this, and I'm just going to put them on either end. Mostly just so I don't look like a clumsy fool on camera. I'm not even going to do the back side here. Alright. And then just take that paper off. Now, you can use a variety of glues or no glue at all. If you're wanting to keep it very simple, one thing that you could do is just grab some wooden clothespins, and you can just pin your project together while you do this stage rather than use the glue. And clothespins are cheap. I think my wife just whispered at me that 48 of them cost her $1 at the dollar store or something like that. So, I don't want to pound into my work surface too much, so I'm going to slide the cutting board over here. Again, for expediency's sake, I'm going to use my stitching irons. However, I'm going to show you first how you can just use a regular awl. So rather than line up your stitching like this, you can use your awl. Now, the problem with an awl is stitch spacing, how to be consistent. And this is a leaf-bladed awl. So let's see if you can see that. Okay. So it's basically going to give you the same kind of a diamond hole as my stitching irons. And all you would do is just pierce through like that, and you walk it along. Okay? That takes forever, and I'm sure you will all fall asleep if you sit there and watch me do that. So I am just going to apologize for the noise here. You want to go through just to pierce the leather. You don't want to drive it right into your board. Okay? And for a quick release, another trick that I use is a chunk of beeswax. I literally just stab the prongs into the beeswax and then move along. Just like that. Now, if all you have is an awl and you want to try and get consistent stitching spacing as much as you possibly can, okay, just take your ruler and your awl and just do a quick poke and space them out every 1/4 of an inch or 3/16 or whatever spacing you choose, and just use the ruler to help give you that consistency instead of using a prong like that. and just keep going along. Now, if you're using a heavier thread, you may want to consider a drive punch, which will remove a round plug from your leather. Okay, you can get them in a variety of sizes. This one here is the 1 millimeter or the size 000. I have them up to, I think, an inch wide is the largest one I own. Now, when I'm punching my holes, I am leaving about 1/8 of an inch between the holes and the edge of my leather. The reason I'm doing that is because if I go too close to the edge of my leather, you will have a weak stitch that could eventually tear the leather out. Oh, and I forgot here, I went one over on this side. I actually forgot to do that here, so I'm going to rectify that right now. And the reason for that, okay, is because when I stitch, I want the stitch to go past the edge of my leather so that there's nothing that will catch and pull up. We're going to go back to my thread. Again, I want to hide the end of my thread because I'm not doing a saddle stitch on a stitching pony. So I'm actually going to start somewhere not at the end, and I'm going to go through in between my layers like that, okay? So that my thread start is completely hidden. And then I'm going to work my way back toward the edge. Just like this. You get pretty quick at this. Often what we'll do around here is if I have a project that requires a lot of stitching, I'll get the wife to go pick out a movie or something. I'll prep all of my stitching holes, and then we'll go out and I'll sit in the easy chair and sew away while we watch a movie together. Way to keep the hands busy while and this is why you put your tools away when you're done. Do as I say, not as I do. So because I'm not doing the 2-needle method, I have to sew back again over old territory. So I have gone over so that is going to prevent the pull-up, and now I have to go back just like that. Now, because I'm not doing the saddle stitch, I have to be very careful with the consistency of my stitches so that tension is consistent, so that I don't have lumpy looking stitches where one is loose and the next one is tight. Also, because I've done the diamond stitch, they're supposed to all be angled one direction, and this method is inferior because it doesn't really allow for that, and you're going to wind up with not quite as pretty of a stitch. So having a stitching pony for a saddle stitch is definitely preferable, but as you can see, You don't really need one. You can get the job done just fine without one. And I'm trying to go as quickly as I can here. But often this can be like the relaxing phase because you can listen to some music or throw an old familiar movie on. Whatever. And again, if you have, you know, arthritis or sensitivity issues in your hands, keep a pair of pliers handy to help you out. Try and get the ones that have some kind of a smooth. These needle nose are completely smooth. There's no texture, there's no milling on the inside. So if I were to grab something with them, I'm not leaving tool marks.
Question. Somebody would like to know, do you have a stitching pony to show? I don't know what one is.
I do not actually have a stitching pony in the shop right now.
I'll pull up a picture.
My wife is going to pull up a photo of one and maybe drop it in the comments. A stitching pony is a wooden stand that all it is it's an extra pair of hands that just grabs the project and holds the project so that both hands are free for you to be able to sew with. I should have one around, and I don't, and I apologize. If I'm going to talk about something, I should have a demo. Thank you for that question, by the way. So, and of course, if you have a sewing machine that can handle heavy leather, antique singers are a wonder for this particular type of project. They handle thinner weight leathers like a dream. And 100-year-old Singer sewing machines are readily available. You can find them on your local Craigslist for nothing. But there's something to be said for a good hand stitch. For one, it's stronger because a sewing machine does what's called a lock stitch. Now, a lock stitch, the thread stays on its side of the leather, okay, or the fabric or the whatever. And then when the two threads in a lock stitch go through the same hole, they hook on each other, and then they go right back out the way they came. To the next hole, back in, hook on each other. And if one thread breaks, both threads unravel. With a saddle stitch, and this is the end result of what I'm doing here is going to be identical to a saddle stitch. It's two threads, well, the same thread but back over itself, where it comes out a hole, over, in a hole, all the way through, up the back side, and then back out again. And if one thread breaks, the other still holds. And that is why hand sewing will always be superior as a product to a machine stitch, but it does take an awful lot longer. All right, we are coming up.
I just posted a link.
My wife should have just posted a photo.
A link.
Or a link to a
Stitching
stitching pony. I can see there, yeah, Tandy leather. There it is. Tandy sells two different stitching ponies. One is half the price of the other. My suggestion is get the half price one.
It doesn't say.
The more expensive one, you know, yeah, it's a nicer tool, but I don't think it's quite worth the purchase price. All right, so I have no real easy way of hiding the end of my stitch on this, okay? Unless I get really tricky, and instead of going all the way through to the inside, I am going to separate and come out in between like that, okay? And then I am going to tie a quick knot. And I'm going to bury that knot in between the layers of leather. Cut that. And then I'm going to use the awl and I'm going to stuff that knot in. And what you end up with, if you do it right, you can actually stuff the knot to the inside so that it'll actually be in between the two layers, but on the inside layer of the project. So there you go, almost invisible. You can still kind of see right there, but by the time I'm done with it, that'll be completely gone.
Do you want to show the difference?
Of?
Hiding your knot versus
Oh, yeah. So here, long term, that's what not hiding your knot looks like. You see that right there? The knot winds up fraying and just not being very pretty. So I had just enough thread left on that line for the stitching pocket, for stitching the card pocket. So go back and pull off. I didn't need the whole thing, so I'm going to go about 3/4 of what I had from the last time. I think that should be just about enough. And then again, thread my needle, and then I pierce again. This thinner thread is a lot harder to do without stabbing yourself. Just remember, blood stays on the inside of you. Last thing you want is to discolor your leather. All right. Other than getting the frays down on the knot, another thing that burning my end does is it glues the whole thing together and prevents the whole thing from fraying out on you. Well, I guess, yeah, it prevents you from fraying out. So, again, we're going to go on to our next card slot. And right in front of me, that's why I can't see it. Which of course just made my wife laugh because, you know, she knows me. Again, just so they don't have to cover the project with a bunch of clamps that makes it difficult for you guys to see what's going on. I'm just throwing a little bit of double-sided tape just on the edges like that, just to provide a little hold. Looks better on camera. And then take the paper off. Sticky. There we go. And also, don't do that. Because you will kick yourself later. Especially if you're using glue. And here we go. Now, your tongue. The last thing you want to do is punch your holes along and pierce your tongue. So you're going to want to, I'm actually going to punch my holes from this side so that I can pull the tongue back like that and not damage it. If it were any longer, I would actually tuck it into its keeper and avoid the whole problem entirely. Sit my butt down. No, I can't use tape to hold it down because the tape would leave a residue here. And that's the last thing I want to do because I am going to be doing a finish on this just to protect the leather long term. Now, I'm going to start though over here because I want to line up so that my first hole just goes over. Mallet is right in front of me, which is why I can't see it. There we go. And I'm going to do the same over here just to get me started. But again, I'm going to flip it over and keep going from this side because I'm going to want to have to pull this over and it'll just be easier. I need a little bit more beeswax here. Beeswax just acts as a lubricant and helps the prongs slide out of the leather a little nicer. Now this is the part where there we go. Just like that. Perfect. Okay, got my thread all set to go. Show how the...
How about prongs, how you put one in the old hole?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really good point. To keep your spacings when you're using a pair of prongs like this, when you punch your holes and you take your prong out, take the first prong and put it in the last hole that you made so that you keep your spacing perfect every time, because you're never going to guess that perfectly. All right? Thanks. Now, again, I'm going to start over here. I'm going to get it. Now I could have started over here. I could have started over there. It doesn't matter. It's very arbitrary. And then I'm just going to sew back toward my nearest edge. I'm going to hook on that and that and that and that. All that stuff can go away. There we go. And this is the last stitch. There will be no more sewing after I finish this. But we do still have to dress our edges, and we have to put a finishing seal on the face of our leather. And I'm going to show you a real simple way to do all of that. And getting to my end, last hole, and then back down. Again, the reason we do that is so that this doesn't offer a pull-up point to stress my stitching and tear. Okay. I need a cloth, a cotton bag or something. That's sweet, yeah.
Is it going to be destroyed?
No. Sorry, just sending my wife off to get me the thing I need for the next step. Perfect. All right. Fold that back to keep it out of the way and keep on going. And watching someone else sew has got to be pretty tedious, so I apologize. But we'll get through this together. And get on to the next bit. So I want to talk about the care and conditioning of your leather. If you take care of it, vegetable tanned leather can outlive you. Okay? There's, I've seen doctor and veterinary bags that are 100 years old that are still in excellent shape. And we have one actually that's not in good shape. Was rough used in its life. But yeah, if you take care of it, good leather will outlive you. It's something you can pass down to your grandchildren. And what you want to use is you want to get a good conditioning oil, something that doesn't have a high pH, nothing too acidic. Extra virgin olive oil is a terrible choice. However, regular olive oil is not so bad. Try and find neat's foot oil, mink oil, jojoba oil, even purified cocoa oil is a great conditioning oil. I say purified because, you don't want it to smell like chocolate. Or maybe you do, I don't know. Cocoa oil is a pretty good oil to use on leather. So if you don't mind your wallet smelling like chocolate, you can use the unrefined stuff. Oh yeah. Here's your mink oil. Okay. Now, mink oil today isn't really made from mink oil anymore. It's basically neat's foot oil nowadays with some silicone additives and a few preservatives and a few other things that go into it. And that's what your modern mink oil is. It's not made, I mean, maybe there is a little bit of mink in it, but I don't know. The amount is probably pretty minute.
It says mink oil, silicone, lanolin, and neat's foot.
Yeah. And then there is my next favorite product. This is Aussie Conditioner. It is basically a leather balm. And you can make your own leather balms. Yeah, it's goopy.
It looks like Vaseline.
Yeah, it looks like Vaseline, and it smells a little bit of beeswax, or it does when it's fresh.
Yeah.
because it actually does contain beeswax. And you can make really good quality leather balms by taking beeswax, carnauba wax, and oils like neat's foot, jojoba oil, cocoa oil, that kind of thing, and slow cooking them down into a paste. And the more wax that you put into it, the firmer the balm will be. And it's not just great for leather. Actually, it's a really, really good hand cream as well because, you know, I mean, your hands are made out of what? Skin, right? What do you think leather's made out of? So I actually use that Aussie conditioner as a burn cream more than once, and yeah, it works really well. So here we are. We're coming up on the end of my stitching, and my wife is grabbing me a few pieces of product for show and tell, so that I can just go over what's available, and then I'm going to show you the quick, easy, and do-it-yourself version. A couple more stitches here. All right. Yeah. Okay, that's good enough. All right. Okay, so once again, I'm tying my knot. I've come out the middle of between the layers, and I am burying that knot as deep as I can get it. Okay, and just quickly going to singe that so that that won't fray, and then my mysteriously disappearing awl, which I never seem to be able to find because it's always right in front of me. Okay, there we have it, folks. That is basically the structure of your wallet is now finished. So, just like that. No sensitive information on this one. You take your card, and it's a little bit tight, but not much. And then on the other side, this is not a standard sized business card.
No, I guess not.
Give me a bank card or something. There we go. Yeah.
The more you use it, the more it softens up.
Yeah. And it'll soften up as you use it. That is really tight. That card is just crumbling trying to get it in.
Well, the card you used is slightly smaller than normal size.
So here. There we go. Just like that. Okay, and this is why sizing is very important, because...
But that card was a bit smaller than normal cards. Yeah. It was my...
So, now we need to protect the leather from the elements. Very stiff.
Yeah, you can tell the stitches are nice and tight.
Yeah, you can tell those stitches are nice and tight. And I am looking like a fool on camera here. Because that is very tight.
Just so everybody knows, The card he originally took the measurements off of is smaller than a normal card.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a health card from my work.
Oh,
my work health card.
It is like a
Yeah.
1/16 of an inch shorter.
All around.
I should have actually looked at that before we did this project. Okay, so let's talk about finishing your leather. There are a variety of products. Modern products like spray-on saddle lac. This will add a glossy acrylic finish that's highly flexible. Acrylic Resolene, same thing, except this isn't spray-on, it's paint-on or wipe-on. Okay? And then there's edging materials like Edge Flex or Edge Coat. Okay? These are basically a paint-on rubberized self-leveling paint. If you have a Gucci or Prada bag, the edges are probably treated with something very similar to this. It feels kind of rubbery, and it's a way of getting a nice slick edge without doing a lot of work. Today we are doing none of that. Now I already showed you how to use the antler as a quick burnish and using the sandpaper just to break your edge. Now I'm going to show you a different trick. This is called an edge beveler. This is the size 2 from Tandy. And what this does is it just cuts a thin little ribbon off the edge of your leather. Dave has one. Great.
Dave has there's a delay. Dave has a stitch pony.
Oh, Dave has
Just
a
go
stitch
with what
pony.
I'm saying.
Okay. There we go. We're just going to come along and we're going to break my edges just like this. And we're going to do the back side, the outer face as well. You have a question?
Yeah. Why do you do that now instead of before you stitch?
I do this now because before I stitch, I don't know if the edges of my leather are going to line up very well. I actually have a small section of the corner here where my two pieces of leather are not perfectly lined up, so I'm just going to trim some of that excess off right there before I bevel this side. Just like that. Oh, yeah, see, and there's another spot where the not quite perfectly. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my beeswax here, and once again I'm just going to use the wax as my burnishing agent, all in the same direction. Let's get this stuff out of the way, okay, so that we are matting down the fibers of our leather. Just like that. And this time I'm going to show you how the burnishing stick works. It's got different thicknesses in the grooves. So what you want to do is you want to find the appropriate thickness for the project that you're working on. I think that's the one right there for me today. And I'm going to do a quick warm it up, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then I'm going to finish it all in one direction, just like that. Okay? Again, just warm that wax up, a little friction, and then I'm not really pushing that hard either, just gentle pressure, and then finish it off burnishing in one direction, just like that. Okay? And you can feel when you've warmed your wax up, when you go back and forth, when it stops giving you a little resistance. Okay? And then finish it with a couple of quick strokes in one direction, and then move on. Just like that. There we go. Done that side. Okay. All of our edges are burnished. Okay. Not quite as glassy as what you can get with modern burnishing agents, but that's pretty darn good. You can also go over it with a little water and do a pre-burnish with a little water instead of using the wax first off. And you burnish it with the water, and then you let that dry, and then before it gets too dry, you apply the wax and you burnish it again. Doing that two-stage, you can get a little bit of a glassier finish. I'm not too fussy today. So now we need to protect the leather. I'm going to grab some of that mink oil. And I am not going to use very much, okay? I am just going to put a couple of drops on my fingers, and I am just going to rub it in, just like that. And then another drop. Now this is going to slightly discolor and darken your leather. It's going to look a little bit damp, okay? That's okay. That's actually going to fade really quickly. You don't need a lot of oil in your leather, especially, you know, if it's going to be something that you're going to wear, something that's going to have, you know, money in it, or anything that the oil can damage. Because the thing about neat's foot oil is, and mink oil, is that it never congeals. It remains liquid inside the leather pretty much forever, and it constantly migrates through the leather. And if you don't seal it in, it will bleed back out onto pretty much anything that is resting against the leather for a very long time. Okay, so again, it looks a little discolored right now. That's going to go away in about an hour. If it doesn't go away, then you know you've used too much oil, and practice will make perfect. Okay? Now, my next step, I'm going to go back to my block of beeswax. Okay? And I am going to just gently rub a little bit of beeswax on the surface of my leather like this. Not a lot. Okay? Do it on the strap too. And we're going to go and we're going to do it on the inside. Again, not a lot. You want a very, very thin film. And this is going to give me a wax coating that is going to help protect the leather long term. And then you're just going to take a cotton cloth And you were going to buff.
That's not the best cloth.
Ooh, this is leaving a gray.
Let me get it to bun.
Give me a better here.
I don't
I'll just use this. I will use
Careful, it's a
this.
whole sheet.
I know. Okay. Yeah, that was leaving lint behind. You don't want to leave lint behind. And then you just buff your leather, just like that. Okay. You can see a little bit of that lint got left behind. That'll wipe off eventually. Not the end of the world.
It's just stuck.
Okay? And then if you want that to darken, throw that in the sunlight, and UV light will darken your leather considerably. And you are basically done.
The more you use it, the softer.
Yeah, the more you use it, the softer it gets.
It's only dyed, no finish.
This, this is basically, it's only had a little bit of the Aussie conditioner on it, a little bit of oil, and what is it, 6 years now? 6 years of handling?
It's
And that buttery soft texture. It's very, very smooth. Now, of course, there's dye on this, and I didn't go into the dyeing of the leather. Couple of different things that you can do if you don't want to invest in chemical dyes is you can just give it a bath in some weak tea, like get some black tea, or some coffee. You can brew a black, it's called vinegaroon or vinegar black, or it's also called iron black. And that is a very historically accurate way of getting a deep, rich black in your leather. It's been used by leatherworkers and carpenters for eons. I think the first instance of vinegar black being used is actually dating back to the Egyptians. And the British used it on the decks of their ships to actually prevent dry rot in their wood. And what that does is it interacts with the tannins in the leather. It's not a color. It causes a chemical reaction in the tannins of leather and causes the tannins to turn black. And you get a really, really nice, deep, rich black on it. And of course, the teas and the coffees will give you different browns. You can experiment with natural pigments and dyes. There is a really, really good dye actually made of walnut shells that I really like. That's a nice mid-brown. Experiment. I would love to hear from anybody who wants to give any of those a try and see what kind of results you get. But this is basically the end of the project. If you have any questions, now's the time to throw them up. Thanks for being patient. This has been my first real online class, and I hope I didn't bore you all to tears. Just
There's a delay.
gonna wait because there is a bit of a delay here. So let's see what kind of a delay. Last comments I see are still from James about the stitching pony. And
You just said it's gonna wait because of the delay. It's like a 30-second.
so a 30-second delay. That's not terrible.
30-second-ish.
They had worse than that and landing on the moon, didn't they? And I also wanted to thank you all for coming and watching. There. Now that you're not watching the workbench anymore, let's look at my ugly mug. Hi. So yeah, this is my workshop. It's messy, and it's the spare bedroom in my basement suite.
It's not a basement.
It's a basement suite. We live in a basement. So, a little bit about myself. I probably should have done this at the beginning. I actually am one of the co-founders for the SEA Leather Crafters Facebook group, which, if you're interested, you should check that out. Royal University says, I think you did a fine job teaching. Thank you for being part of our program. Well, I really appreciate that, and thank you for asking me to do this. It was a lot of fun. If you're interested in more leatherworking projects, please join the SEA Leatherworkers Facebook group, and I look forward to seeing all of you there.
James and Michelle both say thank you.
James, Michelle, thank you. I really do appreciate it. I hope we get to do this again. All right, I'm going to sign off now. Have a great day, all.